Good day to you. Welcome to the live stream. I have a question here that came from somebody on Telegram, and I did say that I would answer it, so let's go ahead. It's called Staying in Honor Ratchet Neighbour Edition. This has a lot to do with what happens when we have to deal with people who we might not want around us. There are many ways to deal with this, but this particular gentleman is looking at ways to move into dealing with, unwanted or unsavory circumstances, but staying in honor. So we're going to go through the question and we'll have a look at some potential solutions and maybe have a good time while we're doing it. So it says here, without getting bogged in details, I live in a home in residential area in the southern Gold Coast with my wife and 4-year-old daughter. About 8 months ago, a new family of lovely rascals moved in, bringing their generational trauma and all its accoutrements to our literal doorstep. Since that time, they have been constantly riding dirt bikes up and down our street, music, parking on our nature strip, littering, screaming at each other, domestic violence with the kids, etc. I've worked all over Australia living away from my trade, and I struggle to remember witnessing anything like it. The problem here is that in our home, my family and I are subjected to another person's dysfunction. I don't believe I consented to this, and I've been searching for any answers, even praying to God to reveal the lesson here. Now, in a day gone by, the old me would implement some creative solutions, let's just say, and use a unique set of skills to cause disruption as a way to persuade this lovely bunch of scallywags to sell and move away. Now, because of listening to people like yourself and Owen, I want to do this the honorable way and make sure I carry myself in a way that brings honor to my family and my creator. This is new to me, but I feel intensely it's the right thing to do. I just feel like I could take action and speed the process up, but then it defeats the purpose of having faith. Any advice would be appreciated here. Thanks for listening to my gay TED talk. You're a legend. Enjoy take on things. I've paid my gay way to you with a donation in advance for this ridiculous story and hope you have a fantastic evening. Okay, cool. Well, appreciate the donation and also the question. I think there's a lot in this, and this reminds me a lot of myself from many instances in the past. I have a lot to offer for this, so let's get started. I'll go back through from the start and we'll see where we end up. So, I live in a home in residential area in the southern Gold Coast. So you're talking about, for those that don't know, the Gold Coast is on the east coast of Australia. Very, very popular town and place to live. It's an hour north of Byron Bay. Similar sort of feel, just a lot busier. And I grew up there for 25 years. So as you know, I spent 25 years in the Gold Coast between the age of 11 and like 30 odd, something like that. However that works out, 35 or whatever. So I've got a lot of experience there. I saw it change over the years and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's weird because I've been to other places too where you might have some neighborhood disruptions, obviously, but not the kind that you somehow end up with on the Gold Coast. And you get it in Byron and other areas as well, but I'm just saying like Gold Coast is prolific. So I'm just going to go through a few different ways that I've handled things in honorable and not so honorable ways. And to maybe give some insight into some of these questions as well. You've got your wife and 4-year-old daughter. Now that's different to being a single man. I think some of the things that I've done in the past can be, I wouldn't say excused, but explained by virtue of the fact that I was a young single man. Having a wife and a 4-year-old daughter is another part of the equation because you have to take that into consideration. If you're going to, I'm not saying start, but if it's going to end up in some kind of dispute between you and neighbours, you've got to keep in mind the fact you have your wife and daughter to look after as well. So that changes things. 8 months ago, a new family of lovely rascals moved in, bringing their generational trauma and all its accoutrements to our literal doorstep. I love the way you write, actually. This is not only well written, but creative. And I can see that you're already looking at the honorable way to describe people. So this is good. Since that time, they've been constantly riding dirt bikes up and down our street. This is typical music, parking on our nature strip, littering, screaming at each other, domestic violence with the kids, etc. So when you go to these last two especially, you do see that there's a lot of generational trauma. And you do see that there is a lot that is embedded in this family, whereby a simple, hey, could you please be considerate to your neighbours, is not going to have any effect whatsoever. Because even if they consciously go, yeah, sure, like, no problem, neighbour, mate, like, whatever, they'll be very genuinely friendly in a lot of cases. But as soon as anything creeps into their life that is part of these patterns, it ends up in things like domestic violence or screaming at kids and things like that. So you just got to understand that in dealing with situations like this, you're not dealing with people who are rational across a large spectrum. They're rational to the degree that if you meet them at the right place and right time on a good day, they're like, oh yeah, of course, no problem. Like, we want to be good neighbors. Nice to meet you, etc., etc. And then bang, someone says something, or there's a dog barks behind the house, and immediately they're just like, rah, just yelling at the kids or whatever. So these are unconscious patterns that have filtered their way in. And as you've said, more than likely, generational trauma that you're dealing with. So you're not really dealing with a situation that is, rational. You can't just speak to somebody one-on-one and make rational sense and then come to a rational, logical conclusion about modifying behavior, because it just doesn't happen that way when you're dealing with this. Because even if they want to, and they may very well want to, they may see some, oh yeah, sorry mate, like that music's a bit loud, I get it, no problem, we'll turn it down or whatever. But then next minute, something creeps in, it's way back here, they're not even aware of it, it just creeps in and it overruns any good intention. So that I've seen this a lot, so that's why I'm going to go into a bit of detail with it, but that's what you're dealing with. And it's really good that you're wanting to stay in honor, but you've also asked a super interesting question, which we'll get to shortly. Since that time, I read that bit. So yeah, riding up and down with dirt bikes, that's what happens when kids are, well, there's two things here. It's when kids are kids, like what kids don't like riding dirt bikes up and down the street. If it's not a dirt bike, it's a BMX. If it's not a BMX, it's a skateboard. If it's not a skateboard, it's a scooter. If you don't have toys, you're running up and down the street. So part of it is being a kid, but there's another part where, because I went through, some stuff similar to this, like you really need to get stuff out because it's not happening within your life, within the family. It's not safe. It's not supported. So you like to rev things loud and go really fast and, just sit on the back wheel up and down the street. You don't care that you're disrupting people, and you may even get some kind of satisfaction in it because there is some connection then between your anger or your output and then a reaction. And so that's why kids will often do this. And because you can't tell them what to do, you're not their parents, and their parents aren't telling them off, then they learn that they can just do whatever they want. Unless, of course, they're, whacked over the head with something. But, of course, we're not going down that route here. We're taking the honourable path here. So I've worked all over Australia living away from my trade, and I struggle to remember witnessing anything like it. Two things for that. I 100% agree. I think Gold Coast has a big problem with this sort of thing. But I imagine it's worse now because we're more disconnected than ever. In general, I'm saying across the general population, more disconnected than ever. Way more screens and screen time. Way more, electromagnetic activity in the environment, way more. And people have come through the last 4 years of a lot of weirdness, even if they don't know what's weird, there's weird stuff. These kids may have had medications introduced to them in that time, which is disrupting, again, their ability to self-regulate. So you're kind of dealing with, for want of a better term, the zombie apocalypse of what happens when people are so jacked up on things that are unnatural that they start behaving in ways that are not going to be dealt with, like I said, in a rational and reasonable manner, like it would be if just a quote-unquote normal neighbor is making a bit of excess noise and you're like, hey, would you mind keeping it down? Like, sorry, I didn't realize I was whatever, no problem, it's done. Okay, so we're dealing with this kind of situation. Having said that, I've been in that kind of environment since I moved to the Gold Coast. People making excess noise, like since 1991. From 1991 to 2015, I experienced this in various pockets of the Gold Coast on a weekly basis. So I can't explain that per se. Well, I could, but that's separate topic to this. The problem here is that in our home, my family and I are subjected to another person's dysfunction. I totally agree. So people say things like, well, what's the big deal? Like, people are allowed to party. People are allowed to... And I'm like, yeah, people are allowed to play music. People are allowed to ride dirt bikes. People are allowed to party. But the thing is, you have 1,000 places you could go to do that. This is the one place that I have, and I have the right to my own privacy and peace, and that I can sleep here at a reasonable hour for a reasonable number of hours of sleep. So you do not actually have the right to impose your rights and freedoms to party, ride dirt bikes. It's like no one's imposing on that. Go to the dirt bike track, go to the pub or the nightclub, build a soundproof room or go to a studio, make a lot of noise. No one's telling you can't do that, but it is a huge imposition to be that inconsiderate that you will just go, I'm going to do what I want to do and screw everybody else. So that goes way against natural law. So we're talking about honor here and staying in honor. So the honor scale is tipped way out of balance currently. Like you're sitting there doing your own thing. You're like, yeah, well, I won't do anything like drastic about it, but geez, I sure do wish people would honor my ability to live in my own home and my wife and child to be able to rest. Meanwhile, they're like, screw everyone else. I want to ride bikes. I want to play music. I want to yell at my kids. So they're in a massive amount of dishonor and these scales are tipped way out of balance. Okay, so that we have to establish that as a fact before we can move into how do we handle things honorably, because currently you're being honorable, but there's just no action. So we've got to look at honorable and right action from there. Okay, the problem here, family is subjected to another person's dysfunction. I don't believe I consented to this and have been searching for any answers, even to praying to God to reveal the lesson here. I love this. This is one of the best parts of this entire email. The reason is you are not surely you don't like what's going on, but I'm seeing that you're not a victim because you're even asking the question, have I consented? Because you didn't say, I didn't consent to this. You never said that. This is super important, everybody. He said, I don't believe I consented to it, which means that inquisition has been made. I say it a lot. I'm putting this in my course that I've got coming up. It's in a lot of great detail in this, but the answer is usually the question. Questions usually are the answers. So the fact that you've even given some inquisition away, and especially to a higher power, not just to your egoic, this isn't right, is it? That's a question. It's not a good question. So you had inquisition. I don't believe I've consented to this, but you've obviously asked, have I consented to this in some way? Is this for me somehow? And then you said, even praying to God to reveal the lesson here. This is amazing. This is an empowered way to approach things. So already, in order to find right action or honorable action, you're already coming from the right place. So whatever comes from here is going to be, as long as you still implement the art of questioning, it's going to be the right and honorable thing. So I'm going to give you a couple of, you might call philosophical, thought forms here. One is that if you prescribe to the idea that nothing happens without consent, for example, and even if you're not sure on what kind of subconscious or unconscious level it's happening, that it's there for a reason, well, now you have a better place to come from. Now you're not reactive, you're just acting. Because this isn't a situation you want to be in, and no, it's not right, it's not moral, and it's not just. So you do need to do something about it. So the lesson may be, have you not dealt with these things in the past? Do you continue to ignore things like this so they continue to surface in your field? The second part of it is, has this particular situation or lesson appeared to you in your field many times in the past, but you've gone about it in a highly dishonorable way. Therefore, the lesson needs to repeat until you actually properly learn the lesson. You learn right action, you transcend this particular lesson that ends up in your field, and then they just happen to move away, or they happen to calm down, or you happen to come across $20 million some miraculous way, and you're like, hey, family, is this really our home, or is our home here now? You know what I mean? The more options and opportunities open up when you start opening up to those options and possibilities that maybe you have a role to play in this. And I've been here many times. That's why I can speak from a lot of experience with this, because I dealt with this way too many times until I found ways to deal with it honorably, and I haven't dealt with it since. It's weird. Honestly, it's not weird. It just makes a lot of sense. But I haven't dealt with this for a long time. So I may share things that I've done, but I may not as well, because it might not sound very good, and I'm not that person anymore. But some of them were very, very effective, but I still had to keep learning the lesson. Okay, so maybe I'll just speak on that now. So I've done things where I've gone, right, you're doing this. Now the agreement is that if you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. Like, if you're going to take from me in this way, I'm just going to take from you. I need to balance the universe out. So I would go and do things, I won't say what, but I would balance things out to the way that I felt. If you're going to steal my sleep, you're going to steal my time, my peace, my energy, well, I'm just going to have to balance that out by taking something of yours or doing something that I find enjoyable, and I find fires enjoyable, for example. So I won't say any more than that, but you see the shock and surprise on people's faces where they're like, what? And it's like, how did you not think something like that was going to happen? By the way, anything, I'm not going to go into details, but anything that did happen only happened after I was like, hey, just so you know, everybody in this building can't sleep or do anything, like you're making a lot of noise. Just out of interest, is there a time that you're planning to wind up? And they would often be dismissive, like, yeah, whatever, yeah, like that kind of thing. I was like, look, they're just like, hey, just out of courtesy, like, I'm not telling you can't do anything, like, don't take it that way. I'm just wondering, could you give us the courtesy of letting us know that you might be done by 10 p.m. or 12 p.m. or something, right? Because everyone else here is just like, no one can do anything. So like, yeah, we'll be done by 10. Meanwhile, 10 o'clock comes, the noise increases. You go back outside, hey, glad you're having a good time. And this is me being super nice because I learned my lesson about, having a go at people. You can't tell people what to do, especially if alcohol is involved. Doesn't go very well. So it's like, hey, look, you just mentioned earlier, a couple of hours before, you might be done by 10. Are you going into town to party? Is there a time you might be wrapped up by? Yeah, we'll be done. We'll be done soon, sort of thing. Noise gets louder and louder and louder. You're past midnight, past 1. At this point, you can't just keep going. So that's when, consequences would occur on their part. And I'd stand there. And the weird thing is they would never do anything. They'll just be in such shock that stuff I'm just saying stuff, just being a bit like vague here, but stuff happened. And they're like, how did this happen? And I'm like, how could you not, like, my rationale, my way of seeing it was, how could you not think that was going to happen? So anyway, that stopped some noise, but I would move or they'd move or something. And then it'd just repeat, it'd keep repeating. I realized after a time, I'm like, I thought I was in honor because I went to my brother first to settle a dispute. We have a dispute. You're being too noisy. You're being inconsiderate. We over here need to rest or whatever. Can you go into town? Is there another option? How long are you going to be? Just give us some information, like talk, communicate. That's honorable. But then they would lie and be dishonorable, or they wouldn't communicate and be dishonorable. They were being dishonorable in the first place. So I took it upon myself to balance out the universe. And no matter how many times I did that successfully, it, as in noise or a disruption, would continually find its way back into my field. I don't have to do it again. And then it would go away. And then it would come back in my field. And I'd be like, I mustn't be doing this the right way. I must be taking things into my own hands in a way that's not particularly right. So, anyway, let's continue with this. But so the first thing is this philosophical question. Is the noise there to bother you, or are you going out of your way to bother the noise? Now, that doesn't excuse people's behavior. Please don't take that as a way to just be submissive and non-active and non-participatory in your own life and setting boundaries. But it's just a philosophical question. Is the noise bothering you, or are you bothering the noise? It's just a philosophical question to get you like reframing something in a way that maybe this is here for you, not like happening to you, for example. That doesn't mean you let neighbors just go and be unruly like that and interfere with you and your family's peace. It's just a philosophical question to frame your action, your way of being, your way of doing, to find honor, okay? So the fact that you've even asked is extremely powerful, and even praying to God to reveal the lesson. I love that, and I don't know what's happened in the week or so since I have gotten to this email. Now, in a day gone, the old me would implement some creative solutions to, let's just say, use a unique set of skills to cause disruption. And I've done that too. I've cut people's power. I've done the other things I was alluding to and done things like that. As a way to persuade this lovely bunch of scallywags to sell and move away. So this is interesting because mostly, I think in almost every situation that I can recall, I was dealing with renters. I was renting and the other people were renting. Or the other place was owned, but it was like Airbnbs. Like that was prolific at times where people would just allow others to rent their house as a party house for Airbnb. And it's just ridiculous. Like they deserve not to have a house, in my opinion, if that's what they're going to do with it. So it's very just, it's not honorable in any way whatsoever. So the fact is that they've bought the house. It's a little more difficult to, help people move on if they own the house. Renting, different story, a lot easier. Owning, I don't know how they got the money to own a house if they're like this kind of family as well, but that's beside the point. Okay, because of listening to people like yourself, and I want to do this the honorable way and make sure I carry myself in a way that brings honor to my family and my creator. This is new to me, but I feel intensely it's the right thing to do. I really like where you're coming from here, because to have that much of an intense feeling that you want to walk a more honorable path is amazing. I'll also say that taking a man's life can be the honorable thing to do if it honors you and your family. If it's the last resort, taking a life can still be honorable. Obviously, I am not suggesting that this is what we're going to do here. I'm just saying as a frame of reference, similar to, is the noise bothering you or are you bothering the noise? Okay, similar to that, it's important to realize that you can take a man's life and it is still honorable. It depends on a lot of things though, the circumstances. Do you have no other option? Has this been dealt with in other ways or attempted to be dealt with in other ways? Is this life or death for you and your family? Therefore, it incurs life or death consequences to the other. You can take a man's life in honor. You can take a man's life totally out of honor, of course, as well. But these are just like philosophical frameworks from which we can help to find other answers. Because what a lot of people do, and men today, is we're taught things like you could never do that. It's toxically masculine to impose violence or a threat on another. But it's not. It just depends on the circumstances and who you do it to. You don't do that to children. You don't do that to women, for example. Okay, so it's important to know that as a man, you're the provider and the protector. And that includes protecting, not just from physical violence, but protecting peace, protecting sanity, protecting nervous systems, which in this case are under threat. So we have to take action, and men need to take action. I think in this day and age, men are like, it's attempted as an offer to neuter men to the point of non-action, or the police will do it, the government will do it, or I'll pray to God and God will do it, or I'll just do non-action and then it'll disappear, like things like that. Or because of the suppression, men can be too quick to anger, too quick to action, and it's not right action, but it all happens by way of this imposition on what's right and what's moral and what's honorable. And that's how we get like sporadic behaviors and things. Okay, I just feel like I could take action and speed the process up, but then it defeats the purpose of having faith. No, so there's the biblical story. I shared it many times. I don't even know if it's biblical, but it's religious in some way. Dude is on the roof of his house. The rains are coming. The water started to rise. Like it's an end of days flood. And there's a guy who's down in the street. He goes, I've got a ladder. I climb down. I got a car. I'll get you to safety. He's like, no, it's all good. I pray to God. God will save me. Waters rise. They're coming up higher. Dude comes past in a boat. He's like, jump in. I'll save you. He's like, all good. I pray to God. God will save me. And then waters are rising. He's up to here. The helicopter flies overhead and they drop down a ladder. They're like, climb up. I'll save you. He's like, it's all good. I pray to God. God will save me. Waters rise. He drowns. Ends up going through the gates of heaven. And he's like, dude, God, what's the problem? Like, I pray to you every day. Like, why didn't you save me? And he says, what are you talking about? I sent a guy with a ladder, a guy with a boat, and a guy with a helicopter. So it's not about not taking action. We can't do non-action. Non-action is one of those new age, sort of wrapped up in Buddhism inversions of just non-action. Like, it is how it is. Everything's perfect how it's supposed to be. God will take care of all life, or karma takes care of things. And none of that's really true. There's semi-truth in that, but it's all been inverted. We must take action, especially as men. We must take action. So taking action will speed this up. Sitting back and praying to God will not. So, but it's part of the equation. It's sitting back first so that you can feel right action and find the honorable path by first praying to God and asking, for example, asking if you've consented to it, figuring out if you have a part to play in this. But then you've got to take action. So you can do both. Okay, so the first thing that I would do here is you do have to make peace with the neighbor. You have to. It's a principle from the Bible, and it's called go to your brother first. So don't start legal action. Don't start disputes. Don't burn someone's shed down until you've gone to your brother first. Or don't do it at all. I'm not saying until. Don't take that to say you should do it. I'm just saying go to your brother first. Don't do drastic things. Don't ignore it. Don't pray. Go to your brother first. And you can do this in ways that it's like, you don't have to be fake, never be inauthentic. But if there is a possible point of connection. Maybe you like bikes too. Hey, what kind of bike's that? Is that a Quacker or a what? Like you're gonna talk to them about the bikes or whatever. Or maybe you can tell that they like barbecues and you like barbecues. So it's like, hey, just thought, how about, we break the ice with each other and have a barbecue, something like that. Finding some common ground or connection or whatever. Your kid or your daughter, what do you got, a 4-year-old? What do 4-year-old girls like doing? Rollerblading or something? I don't know. Not cricket or football. I don't know. Like, just anyway, something that you could maybe even involve the other kids. Anyway, you'll figure that part out if it's relevant. I don't even know that that's relevant. But finding a way to create some form of connection. Through the connection, then you have people's defenses come down a bit, at which point you can broach a subject. It's rare that broaching a subject straight away, just out of nowhere, without rapport, is going to have a positive effect. In sales, this is a key principle. You have to build rapport before you can ask for a sale. If you just go, do you want to buy it? Do you want to? It's like, no, I don't. But if you're like, hey, I notice you're wearing such and such. And you don't use these as techniques. But if it's genuine, hey, I notice you're wearing such and such. Like, where'd you get that? I love that. Like, I saw that in America or something and had this story about it. It's like, yeah, me too. So you've got some rapport. And then it's like, so what do you think about the product? Does this meet your needs, et cetera, et cetera? But you build rapport before you start talking about buying and the sale. So similar to if you have a dispute with a neighbor, and this doesn't apply in every situation. Sometimes timing is of the essence and you've got to just go straight for the issue. But how you've described these people, I would figure that at least a genuine, not a fake, not a technique attempt, but a genuine attempt to build some rapport would help to begin with. So I would start there. And then once you got some rapport, then I would bring up some subjects. And especially when you've got generational trauma like this, you are dealing with childhood trauma present and prevalent in an adult body. Or to put it another way, you're dealing with a 12-year-old in an adult body. So don't attack. It would be the same as how you would go to, it's the same how you would go into the, dealing with the kids. I don't know how old these kids are on their bikes and that, but how would you deal with them? If you're just going to yell at them and abuse them and stuff, they're already yelled at and abused. It's not going to do anything. You have to come at them from a different way. And likewise, I would probably, I don't know the situation, not all the nuts and bolts of it. This is just a suggestion. You may want to take a similar approach to them. Obviously, don't talk to them like they're a baby or a child. But you got to be gentle with some of this stuff, because as hard as some people appear, as obnoxious as they appear, they've got these wounds deep inside that need some kind of gentleness in the way that you approach it. So you're going to have to figure this stuff out for yourself, by the way. I can't tell you what to do or say here. These are just concepts to consider. So, and then when the time's right, and when is the time right? Well, you'll feel it. You'll just know. The fact that you've done this much groundwork tells me you'll just know. And when it's time, just deliver it. And deliver it in a way that you have nothing to defend, nothing to explain. These are the principles I talk about in natural law and commerce and communication. And you have nothing to have to baby from their part. You have to be super like they're a breakable vase or something, if you've come from that place already. And then just deliver it. And deliver it with a knowing. These are the principles that I don't think people teach in communication. When you have disputes like this, you just have to speak from a knowing. And then what speaks through you is you as the man and the protector. What also comes through in the communication is the vulnerability of your wife and your daughter. And what also comes through that is God. It will actually speak through you. And as long as you get out of the way of all this, you're not trying to do anything, it's purely authentic in a transmission, things happen. Now, this is what happened. I'm just sharing this because this is how I eventually started to deal with this. Because the reality is that I had to admit to myself, I was almost looking for an excuse to do the actions that I've done in the past. I was like, I'm going to give you the offer, but if you don't take it, I'm almost hoping you don't take it because I'll get some kind of satisfaction in doing the actions that I took thereafter. So it wasn't honorable. Even though I was honorable, I went to my brother first. I asked what you were doing. I was polite. I was giving options. Yes, that's honorable. But deep down, I was kind of like, I wouldn't mind doing this to them later. I wouldn't mind cutting the power. I wouldn't mind climbing on the roof. I wouldn't mind doing this, so it wasn't really honorable. So when I removed that and I was just like, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm only going to come to you in honor. And what gets read or what comes through is different. And like I said, I haven't had to deal with it since. And so yeah, anyhow, I'll leave it pretty much there. I'm just going to suggest that if you do the right groundwork and you're coming from that place of honor, the action will be honorable. So in the question that you've asked, the answer is in the question. Like I said before, the question oftentimes is the answer. It's the paradox. So I think you're absolutely on the right track. The only thing that I think hopefully I've done to you is shift that part that maybe thinks that you don't take action. I think you've got everything right so far. And then, yeah. Anyway, the other things that you can do with people just off of the cuff is you can mirror things back. Sometimes people don't know how obnoxious they are until it's mirrored back. Now, this can backfire on you, but I'm just going to give you I've used this before in a different context and it worked really well. So you could, for example, audio record, and the better quality you can get of the recording. So just off the top of my head, if you don't know what it is, you could get like a Zoom H4, H5A6, something like that, like a few AA batteries in it, and plant it somewhere where no one's going to see it or find it, but you can record some of the abuse being spat at the kids, for example. And then what you can do is you can play that, you can either do it, on the down low, like mail it to them, email it to them, like a recording so only they hear it, or you can actually blast it through speakers back at them. It's shocking to people because what will happen is they'll realize that that's the abuse they got when they were young and they're just doing it. And they'll realize how it sounds, and it can be shameful, embarrassing, a lot of negative things. But sometimes we need negative things. Like, honestly, sometimes we just need a slap in the face to wake up and move on from what we're doing. So it's not always this, just be gentle with everybody and don't cause any fuss. And sometimes honestly, like a kick up the backside is what helps people along. Now, I'm not saying you do this, but I'm just saying, like, even though it might bring shame, embarrassment, and et cetera, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. If the intent is right and there's honor in the intent, right, then that makes the action honorable. But it's not the first thing you do either. And you have to measure this out. I'm not telling you to do anything. Don't just use that as a technique, because that would be highly dishonorable to do and probably highly inappropriate, especially depending on who else is in the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just giving you different frameworks by which I gave you 2 different ways you could execute that. What's right, only you'll know. I'm just riffing here. So then, other things you can do is just start getting a relationship with the kids. Now, I realize this is very, very, be really careful about what I say here. But for example, when I grew up, I had a good relationship, even from the age of 5 or whatever, with other parents in the streets. Like, I would go to their house and get some food, or get a lift somewhere, or whatever. And it would usually start by playing cricket or football or something in the street, in the neighborhood. So this is not I know it's in today's day and age, everyone's a pedo and you don't talk to other adults and everyone's a stranger danger and all that sort of stuff, but that's not natural. So if it's natural, if it's authentic, if you like bikes or whatever, for example, you can just it's a bit of rapport building or a bit of whatever, genuine interaction with the kids, because kids are innocent at the end of the day. They're only expressing what they're growing up in. They're not bad kids. So you can give them a bit of better attention. Let them know how that they're show them, don't tell them not to ride their bikes. Just go, wow, I can't stand on the back wheel for that long. That's really amazing. How long have you been riding bikes for? Do you what are you riding? It's a Pee-wee 50 or it's a Kawasaki. Oh, it's a Yamaha. Yeah, I like Yamahas. Just something, And then it's what bike would you love? Would you get a Harley one day? Or let them talk. If they're interested in stuff, let them be interested, because you never know. They might have these great interests and dreams that never get heard in the household, and that's why they're doing that in the street. And you've obviously heard how they're spoken to by the parents and yelled at and abused. So it's give them what they don't have. That would be God speaking through you. That would be God showing up through the form of you to give these kids something that every kid needs and craves and just isn't being given. So similar to the guy on the roof, God doesn't show up to give him a pat on the back. God shows up through you to just go, hey, look, that was really great what you did. Well done. A little bit of pride, being proud of somebody. showing some form of like recognition. They're probably never recognized. Like, who knows? I don't know the story. I'm just like making this up. So you can start to do that. And then you can start to do things like, have you ever like ridden a skateboard or ridden a normal bike or something? And you can teach them skills that their parents aren't giving them. That is in no way out of the bounds of like, you never do that with someone else's kids. No, like if they're not being given this, they're being abused, give it to them. You're in your right, you're in right action, and you're in honor to do so. So wrong action and dishonor is obviously gingerbreading them into your basement or something, you know. But if you're giving and helping them and filling up the food that they're not being fed through their family, then it's a good thing to do. And then it could be something like teaching them a skill. You know, like you might play a sport or an activity with them. You could teach them to throw or catch or kick if their parents or family aren't doing that. I don't know what the situation is. This is just random stuff. That might not apply, but take the principle and apply it how it applies to this situation. And eventually it starts to be where like, maybe you're reading to them, you're helping engage their mind, you're just helping them. Maybe they're at an age where they could somewhat connect with your daughter. I don't know the ages of these kids. But then there's an activity where of course you get the parents' consent. You say, hey, look, me and my family are going down to the lake. We're going to do this. Your boys have shown some interest in that. Would you like some time to yourself? We're happy to bring the boys and look after them. We'll feed them. We'll bring them back by 5 p.m. Something like that, where you're honoring the parents and their role. And you just go on like, they're welcome to come. And if the boys want to come of their own accord, great. And then they're starting to be around a better influence, a better environment. They're starting to feel what it feels like to have attention, validation, love, support, being heard, and all that kind of thing. Again, I don't know what's relevant here. I'm just giving you like stuff I've seen a lot of times before. So then over time, what happens is you're getting a lot of satisfaction out of the fact that something positive is occurring. The kids then start to actually heal. And as we know through generational trauma, the kids start healing it. The parents start healing by way of like, that's just how the healing effect occurs. They stop yelling at their kids as much. The kids aren't as unruly. The parents start to tone down, or at least then you have access directly to the parents. And all going well if honor is imparted in every step of the way. And then the dad just starts like revolting against that and starts getting whatever, just punch him in the face. Like, don't let anybody tell you that that's the wrong thing to do. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but in the right situation and circumstance, you know, like, actually don't do that. I don't know why I said that, but you know what I mean? It's like, you have to meet people where they're at and you have to give them an opportunity. But if they're just going to like, it looks like they're going to, you know, be making things worse or whatever, or just, you got to put people in their place. Don't punch them in the face, but bring them into line. Let them know what's right, what's not right, what's going to be tolerated and what's not. And obviously some positive reinforcement there too, because that is a 12-year-old boy trapped inside of a man's body who has not dealt with that. He hasn't been heard. He hasn't been validated, or no one's proud of him. He hasn't, whatever, A, B, and C. Fill in the blank of what you're giving to the kids. Okay, so I hope this makes some kind of sense and is helpful. But yeah, you got to take action. That's the main thing. But like I said, just go back a few steps to what I was speaking about earlier. You don't know that if you step into the right action, the right thing to do, the honorable thing, you don't know that you might be the one that moves to a better place, because that might actually just be the thing to do. Because as we progress through our own soul journeys, and that of not just individually, but with our families, you might realize that the resonance of this place on the Southern Gold Coast, because Southern Gold Coast, there's some beautiful places, but there's some very low socioeconomic places there as well. You might just realize you weren't properly connected to yourself. You ended up in not the right place. And it was through that disconnection. You were making mind decisions rather than feeling like, where are you at in your progression? Did you make the wrong decision? And did that family turn up by God to show you that, like, dude, like, where are you? Like, do you want to stay here and fight this? Or are you ready to actually like recognize this is a subtle message? This isn't your area. This particular town, this particular street has a resonance that is not you. It attracts these people. And that's how I've designed it. You, my friend, you need to start making it. Are you willing to let go of like, no, this is my place and I found this and I whatever? Or is it time for you to move on? Because that might come at any time. And the way that life works is that it doesn't come, you don't get like a notice in the mail, hey, you're starting to progress energetically in around 6 to 18 months, roughly, you might want to think about moving, but don't worry, the values will be just fine. You'll be able to just swiftly, smoothly move from here, and it'll be really obvious because you'll also receive in the mail the next town you're supposed to go to. Okay, so don't worry about it. Everything's fine. That's not how it works. You have to, as you've been mentioning here about faith, you have to listen to it, and the messages are really subtle. The more you're starting to progress, the more subtle the messages are until they're really overt. But then it's also not so obvious where to go next. But then in a roundabout way, it is obvious. But what will happen as the trick is that your mind will get in the way and trick you. Be like, is it though? Or does it? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't line up with this, or I don't think that. Oftentimes, and I'm not saying that this is the case here. I don't know the case. I'm just saying this is like another thing that is part of natural law, is that it's like you have to start learning to feel and to recognize these feelings and to move with that, even if it's into the unknown to the mind. So yeah, it might just be that that's not your residence anymore. That house, that street, that town, it might be time to go. But it's also time, if you do that without meeting this teacher that is currently there, this sound, this noise, this disruption, it will, I would imagine, under natural law, I'm not saying I'm right, I'm saying under natural law, it may follow you to the next place. Even if you got the other parts right, this isn't our residence, let's trust, let's have faith, the feeling, it's here. I would never have thought that it's here. So you just take right action and you do that. Even if it seems like you lost money here and there, it'll come back. If it's the right thing, it'll come back in other ways you don't know. You got to get out of the mind, right? So then, but if you do that without meeting the teacher where the teacher has met you, it may then just follow you to the next place. So it may be both. It may be everything I've just spoken about. So yeah, I hope that helps. And thanks for the question. Thanks for the donation as well. And I have a stream coming up that's to do with honor, and that will be in the next few days. So stay tuned for that one. Okay, bye for now.